Well, welcome to the Trustmark webinar. Thank you all for joining this webinar on Skilled to Build. I am Avinash Rajan, Proposition Director at Trustmark, and I will be chairing the session. For those of you who may not know us, Trustmark is the only government-endorsed quality scheme for home improvements. During the session, you will hear from folks who improve homes and live with the daily challenge of finding skilled people to employ. Before we start, I should mention that the session is being recorded and that attendee names are hidden on the screen. If you have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A tab that appears on your screen. I'd like to set some context for the ground that we'll cover today. At Trustmark, we wanted to focus on the small and micro businesses within the repair, maintenance, and improvement sector and understand the challenges they face around recruitment, training, and funding and retention, both of people and knowledge. 90% of the RMI sector is micro and small businesses. They are the lifeblood, and their challenges are different in scale and complexity to larger businesses. They rarely have in-house capability to cover elements such as HR, legal, finance, or business planning, making it difficult and costly to access and navigate potential talent pools, skills training, and funding. We at Trustmark wanted to give them a voice. We asked Eureka Research to speak to them on our behalf. With over 1,200 responses to our research, we understood 45% of the RMI businesses surveyed reported that they had at least one existing vacancy. And in growing businesses, this rises to 5. We also asked Oxford Economics to assess the potential economic impact of recruiting. They identified that if the gaps were filled, the vacancies were filled, an additional 195,000 skilled roles could be filled in this sector. And in turn, this could generate about 4.1 billion in additional gross value added, helping the UK's growth agenda. During this next hour, you will hear from Dave Ruston, who is the co-owner of Eureka, a market research agency which specializes in the construction and home improvement sectors. Dave will be presenting the headlines from the research that we had conducted. Following this, we will have a panel discussion where you will hear from Daisy Turner, who is a plumbing and heating apprentice working for Toucan Heating and Plumbing. She has direct experience of the struggles people have in finding and completing apprenticeship programs. We also have Rupert Keys, who's been running his Keyscape design and construction business for over 30 years. Rupert has become increasingly concerned about the huge skills gap in the industry, which he's now seeking to address with the launch of Task Academy. James Reeve, who is the founder of Royal Spa Decoration. James has been a great supporter of apprentices, and in addition to winning many accolades for the work that he does, he has also won the Purdy Mentor of the Year award. Colin White has worked in the construction industry for over 15 years, holding senior positions in training across Tier 1 and Tier 2 contractors before he joined CITB. He will speak about the efforts that the CITB and the government in general is doing to help develop skills. I will now hand over to Dave to run through a few slides that will help set the context for the discussion that will follow. Dave?
Great. Thank you, Avinash. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for everyone logging on and taking some interest in our research and our consultation. So my challenge is to distill a 100-page report into 10 to 15 minutes, which I will attempt to do. I've heard Avinash has a reputation for being a stringent timekeeper, so I'll make sure that I whittle through my slides. Apologies if I have to sort of not go over every detail. This will be recorded, I think, and it will be made public at some point. So if you have a particular interest in any of the numbers, either get back in touch with us via Trustmark or directly, or re-listen back to the recording. The full report is, of course, online for everyone's nighttime reading. What have we got here? We've got a fantastic survey. Richard and I, Eureka, have never run a survey on the RMI sector that's achieved such a fantastic response rate, over 1,200 responses. So what does that give us? That gives us the confidence in the results that we know they're correct. It also gives us the opportunity to look through the lens of lots of different trade types. So you can see some of those illustrated on the bottom here. So, we literally cover general builder through to decorators, sparkies, plumbing and heating, landscaping, roofing, you name it, we've got it in our sample, which is amazing because it's given everyone a voice and made sure that it's not just the noisy people who get heard in the consultation. You might be thinking, how did we do that? Because this is a notoriously difficult sector to engage with and to get feedback on, be it through surveys or more qualitative methods. Well, we pulled a lot of favours in and we had really wide engagement. I have to say thank you to Trustmark for being such great partners and supporters on this work. So Avinash, Devinder, Nick in particular, who led and opened many doors in the first instance to scheme providers. So the scheme providers were particularly fantastic in terms of amplifying this survey to their members. But what was also good was that we used our own network at Eureka to extend it beyond just our database, but to other trade bodies that aren't particularly under the current radar of Trustmark, and bring in merchants such as Wolseley and Wix and other partners. So my thanks go to those partners as well. You can see the reference here to tricks of the trade. It was a long survey, but hopefully didn't feel too onerous, and it felt interesting and relevant. That wasn't down to luck. That was down to our experience at Eureka, but also using the expertise of people who live and breathe things like the apprenticeship world. So thanks to Hannah, for instance, at the apprenticeship partnership. Thank you to CITB colleagues. Hopefully they're on the call as well. So people helped with the design, but they also helped with the amplification and making sure that we got a really good number of responses. So on to some of the results. Fortunately, some of this is the bad news story before I then go on to the good news story and try and finish on a positive. We have got to go into this with our eyes wide open, and plenty of people on this call this evening will be acutely aware of the aging workforce that's confronting us. At Eureka, we called this the cliff edge for many years. Lots of people have got different words for it. As long as we've been running Eureka, we've been seeing this cliff edge come closer and closer, and we've been talking about it for many years. We're now at a point here, you can see on the chart, the average age of a business owner in the RMI sector is 54. So that's someone on the tools. Another way of expressing that is that the proportion of people in the sample who were over 55 was 44%. So nearly half of the people in our sample are thinking of retirement. They're either semi-retired or thinking on average of winding up within 6 years. And look at that stat right at the beginning there of how that compares to the average workforce across all sectors. There's only 21% that are 55 years or older who are economically active, which is half the amount that we find in the RMI sector. So what does this all mean? It means through our calculations that we have about 39,000 businesses, this is just in the RMI sector, who are at serious risk of disappearing because they're just going to fold or they don't have a concrete succession plan in the next 10 years. Another bit of bad news or bad context is that we still have a problem with diversity in the sector, and people who are on the tools, people who are out and about talking to people who have a vested interest in this sector will be acutely aware of that because they just open their eyes and they see it. I want to hear from Daisy in the next few minutes about how she's found it as a sort of female entrant into the sector. But the statistics speak for themselves, really. Whilst we've got 7% of the total workforce, that's people pulling all the strings within businesses, not just on the tools, in our sample. When it comes to those who are actively on the tools, that plunges right down to 3%. So although there's been lots of talk about addressing this one element of diversity, we still have this problem where there is a serious lack of female diversity. The full report splits things like this out by different trade types, for instance, and there's a lot more detail to all of these charts. But I just wanted to make note of that really important feature of the labour force. Juggling plates. What do we mean by this? What I mean is that what our figures show overall is that it's not easy to run a renovation and maintenance and improvement business. It's really very difficult. And one marker that we use to measure the health of businesses is the average order book. So we ask business owners and senior decision makers, well, what does your what do the number of confirmed projects look like for you going forward in the calendar? The average from this study is 2.6 months. That tallies with other studies that we've done across the sector in recent years, and is down from that immediate post-COVID blip that everyone was probably acutely aware of because they were running around like headless chickens. So it's been pretty stable at that kind of figure for a while. But look how varied it is dependent on the size of the business. So whilst the medium-sized businesses that have come into this study have a really healthy order book of nearly 8 months in total, it comes right down for those people who are just a single operator, 1.6 months on average. So it's not a massive conclusion. It's not a massive leap to then say, well, they've only got 1.6 months amount of work. How can they have the confidence, and how as an industry can we give them confidence to take on youngsters, to take on returnships, to take on more people and grow their labour force if they can't be sure that there's more work that comes after that 1.6 months in particular. We still have we still have a feature of this sector that one of the key ways of getting around the lack of labour in this area is the reliance on contingent labour. What I mean by that is using some contractors. So those stats at the bottom there just pull out what the average number of employees were in our survey, 3.4. But actually, in terms of regular staff who are subcontracted, so they're not, but that includes CIS, it's actually a few more than that, so 4.3 on average. So here I just want to sort of try and be a bit more positive and talk about a sort of untapped potential. I think Avinash, in your introduction, you referenced one of the key stats from the report, which is nearly half, 45% overall of business surveyed say they have at least one vacancy. So that might not be an advertised vacancy that's sort of in the press or on Indeed.com, but if the right person came along at the right time and they had the right skills, they would the business owner would definitely take them on. How do businesses sort of cope with such a profound lack of labour? Well, that's what that bar chart down the left-hand side begins to tell us. So these are the actions that result from not having enough people to do the work. When we combine some of these up together, what it means is that 52% deal with this lack of labour by taking on less work. It's a pretty sort of obvious and fundamental point. So they don't sort of overstretch themselves and work, 24/7. They're working really long hours as it is. So these figures at the bottom here, which are really big, eye-watering amounts of money that the Oxford Economics Agency have worked out, is the headroom. So if all of these vacancies could be filled, then the increase to the economy overall would be 4.1 billion. And this is just the RMI sector, not the new build sector, which often gets a lot more noise talking around it. And government stakeholders will be really pleased to know that 4.1 billion isn't just in the south. It's spread right across the country as well in terms of its potential. And we're doing for time, Avinash. 5 more minutes. In terms of diagnosing what this problem is, there's a hypothesis that it's about retention as much as it is recruitment. So that 45% of people who'd say they would take someone on, is that because they get people, but then they just can't keep hold of them? Well, these figures suggest it's not necessarily about retention, because the majority say that once they found someone, they're actually really good and they can develop and nurture that person. And I know James will want to talk about nurturing as well with some of his youngsters that he's that is kept as well. So retention for a lot of sectors isn't the issue. It's about the volume of people coming into the funnel. So on that theme, on apprenticeships, because that is obviously a key part of the conundrum here. Some key facts on the left-hand side before I go through the obstacles on the right. These numbers are quite low. So when we just look at young apprenticeships, 34% of the businesses that we surveyed confirmed that they'd taken on a 16 to 21-year-old in the past 3 years. That drops to just 13% of sole traders, really low. It comes up a little bit when you extend the definition of apprenticeships to mature apprenticeships or returnships, but that's only 38% overall. Really soberingly, over 3/4 of the businesses were surveyed, 77%, said they weren't interested or actually intend to reduce the apprenticeship opportunities that they're putting out in the next 12 months. So we've got a worsening situation rather than an actively improving one. And one of the key factors that we've been hearing is about EPAs and some of the issues around that endpoint assessment. Only a third is reported from official statistics of current construction apprentices are getting to the end of their courses. So we've identified some of the obstacles. These are all in the full Trustmark report. They're in a kind of descending order of prominence in terms of the number of people that agreed with them, or the feedback that we got from some of our open answers. But the truth is that there's a complex set of interrelated factors that stop any of these businesses, be it the smallest ones through to the micro and medium-sized businesses, which is about capacity, is about having the amount of time that these young people deserve to be supporting them and developing them, and that's often really lacking. It is about the money. We have to put that on the table and say it is about the current grants not being appropriate and suitable for the types of apprenticeships in the trades. It is about the admin and the paperwork, be that perceived or real. There's a call out here, number 4, for a lack of support from some of the colleges, that they feel that apprenticeships are hoisted upon them, and some of the colleges are not as good as they could be in terms of offering that support, and that some of those courses just simply aren't sort of up to it in terms of being adequately tailored for the ever increasingly complex set of trades that we face going forward, if you think about renewables and low carbon. And let's face it, our sector isn't operating in a silo. There's massive, fierce competition from other sectors as well, be it logistics, digital, and engineering. So everyone's fighting for this young talent. So we've got a set of internal obstacles, but also that broader one as well. I feel I may have come to the end of my time, Avinash. I had a few more slides, but shall I just skip on to my final one? Yeah. I can always come back to some of these if some of the questions relate back to some of those themes. But I just wanted to give a call out to the full report, which I referenced. It is online. It's a great read, but I would say that, wouldn't I? And it's not just full of facts and figures. People do love a stat. I love a stat. But I also love hearing from real people as well. So it was great that Trustmark gave us an open envelope to do case studies here, and we identified 7 amazing small growing businesses and enterprises, some of whom we have in our panel, and some hopefully have joined the webinar as well. So thank you to all 7 of those, because they've injected a voice that sometimes gets lost in the numbers. And that's what this session is really about, hearing those voices, hearing what the issues are, and then discussing some of the solutions. So thank you for listening, and I can come back to some of those slides that I had to move over.
That's great. Thanks, Dave. We'll now go into a little bit of a panel discussion where I will invite our colleagues, Daisy, Rupert, James, and Colin to address some of the findings that we've got, but overlaid with sort of real world experience. So Daisy, if I may start with you, if that's all right, given the context of the fact that you are an apprentice yourself, you've been through an apprentice program, and you have the real world experience of the challenges that came with trying to find a good apprenticeship program and then be registered for it. And if I may ask you to speak on behalf of other apprentices, what are the real practical suggestions that you have for people around the table and who are listening in to help make it more attractive for people such as yourselves to come into the trades? Is that to do with schools and college curricula, or is it wider than that? I think we'll have to unmute Daisy.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So I think the attraction to the trades is definitely there. So if, let's say there's 5 apprenticeship roles, most companies will often get somewhere between 10 and 20 applications, and they have to whittle that down. But then it's the retention, because the colleges to study the specific courses, there's so few, so you have to travel so far. So the college that I go to, it takes me about an hour and a half to get there. So it puts a lot of younger people off. But the attractions there, people want to do the trades, but then it's keeping people. So initially, like I say, the travel time, and then it's the frustrations with the college. So my college in particular, so I study plumbing and heating. I'm doing my gas at the moment, so I am right at the back end of my apprenticeship. But even so, I started 5 years ago. It should be a 4-year course, but because it sort of keeps getting pushed back, it is taking longer than it should have. But because of all of it's materials really, so we can't do all of our practical assessments and things like that because of the materials aren't there. So then people get frustrated and then they leave, whether it's personal frustration, like the actual learner, the actual apprentice, or whether it's their company sort of get fed up of waiting and they sort of like pull them off the course and either put them in privately, or they sort of give up. Some of them do give up, I will be honest. Not everyone stays in the trade. Some people will try and explore a private training centre, but some people do just get fed up with it, which you can't blame them. It is really frustrating, but it is a shame that they don't sort of stick at it. So when I first started college, I think there was 40 of us in my intake, and we're down to 8. So, wow. And it's very similar, whoever you talk to from all different colleges up and down the country. So there is a really high dropout rate. For me personally, as a girl, I haven't really had any issues, but I do know other females in the trades that sort of get comments or sort of get discouraged, and again they sort of lose hope and sort of give up a little bit, which is a shame, but you really can't blame them. It's not always the most supportive environment, shall we say. So you can't blame them, but it is a shame. But I really enjoy it. I've enjoyed it since day one. The only issue is college, unfortunately. I mean, I started 5 years ago, and I didn't start college officially for 18 months from when I first started, because we couldn't find the right course, because we couldn't find one local, which is why I went so far away.
Right. Oh, that's that's really helpful context to then, if I ask Rupert, given your experience of trying to build Task Academy, and also your experience of being in the industry for a long time, does what Daisy says resonate, and how are you addressing it through Task Academy?
Yes, absolutely. That's the whole reason why I started Task Academy. Having been in the landscaping industry for over 30 years, especially over the last, I would say, 10 years of my business, I increasingly found it difficult to find younger people to come into the industry. And if I did get younger people, there was about a 50-50 split on them being keen and wanting to learn, to younger people not wanting to work. They were there just to have a job. Obviously we always went through a vetting process, but that I got increasingly frustrated. And I'm not saying it was just younger people either, but I just got increasingly frustrated that people don't understand that when you are in a trade, especially within the construction industry, how hard it is, physically, and sometimes mentally. But occasionally you just get that odd one. But when I started in my trade, there were 25 people on my course, and I think about 20 are still in the industry, and I don't know what's going on. And Daisy said something about retention and support, from colleges. I don't think that's there now. The amount of time spent at a college is minimal, and there's not that encouragement from certain colleges or lecturers in taking that career forward. They need the support from the industry. They need to be guided on what are the potential sort of careers within the industry. And I don't think a lot of lecturers these days tend to have industry insight and connections. And that is another reason why I started Task Academy. We have 20 different trainers who are all within the industry still. So we encourage people to join it because we have that insight, we have that knowledge on all the sectors that you can go into in the landscape industry, and that support. One of the things that we do at Task, everyone has my business card. All my students have my business card, and we have a WhatsApp group. So we encourage them to send in photos or ask questions at any point. I probably get about 5 a day, and I will answer every single one. If I can't answer, I put it out to my trainers, and they give the answer as well. But it's quite disappointing nowadays that a lot of colleges that teach horticulture or landscaping, tend to get the students or the numbers for a financial incentive, and I've had first-hand experience of that when I had landscape company. The student or the apprentice was meant to be in employment, right to the end of their course. They left, didn't get another job in the industry, but the college continued with their studies because otherwise they would have lost out on the end finance for that student. Mm-hmm. And it's just something that I'm very keen to push forward, that giving students that opportunity and that the students that support from people that are still within the industry. I think that is so important. We've got to encourage the students coming through, and by helping them along the way, with contact, that's what we try to do as much as we can.
Great. There's 3 themes that I pick up from there. One is something around at a very basic level, make it easier and facilitate the conversation between businesses that, such as yourself, where you've had long experience and you're looking to give back, and that came back very strongly through the research. Some operational efficiency around making sure that the incentive associated with the college and the student are aligned. And then there's a third theme which I think resonates with something that James spoke very eloquently about when he spoke at the House of Lords event when this report was launched, around how do you nurture and manage apprentices through the program so they complete it. So James, I wonder if you could give us your experience on how it has worked and how you dealt with the situations that for finding apprentices, but also then getting I think it was 2 or 3 successful apprentices all the way through.
Yeah, I think first of all, just like to say I've just listened to both of you guys, and actually I think there's a lot of stuff I could draw on. I think particularly with Daisy, I think it's very worrying that there's so many similarities in the story of my apprentices and the same as yours, because that means that ultimately the problem is not just isolated to my region, it's actually sort of nationwide, which is obviously is bad news, because like I spoke about before, I've had the very similar issues in that my apprentices couldn't train in our local college. That's been shut down for some time now, so they have to travel to like the other side of Birmingham, which is, you know, the same sort of distance. It's over an hour on public transport to get there. And also when it comes to the endpoint assessment, they had the same problem, which was the facilities just weren't there for them to do their endpoint assessments, which meant that in exactly the same way as Daisy, they what was due to be a 3-year course ran on for 4 years, and it was only when that was then outsourced to a private company in Wolverhampton, which is even further away from where we're based, that they're actually given somewhere to effectively do their endpoint assessments. And I think that's worrying, in that, you know, like how can you expect people to be enthusiastic about, you know, giving up, you know, their time? And let's face it, when you're an apprentice, you're not on footballers' wages, you know what I mean? So it's you know, you're asking these young people to turn up, and yes, you know, as an employer, 100%, we need those people to turn up, and we need 100% from them, and we need them to be keen and willing. And you know, we do get a lot that aren't, unfortunately. However, equally, you know, we can't expect young people to keep turning up and giving 100% and sort of be treated in this way by, you know, the educational side of it. And I do believe that there are huge failings in the educational side from my experience. And like I said, for me personally, if I'd done a 3-year course and then it run on a year, I don't know if I'd have had the willpower to stick with it. And so credit to those like yourself, Daisy, and my apprentices who have done, because it's a lot to ask for people. It has been a success story, and so far, touch wood, 100% of my apprentices have passed their endpoint assessments. But I do believe that, you know, the employer is being lent on a little bit too much in terms of getting people across the line, and they need to streamline the process in how we get people not only through, but how we look after the people that we already have in the system. Because it's all very well, like you said, getting, you know, 500 people signing up to a course, but we need to get all those people across the line. Otherwise, it's a complete waste of time, really. And it's a waste of time for the employers as well. Like, we don't want people turning up who aren't interested, who aren't going to be a success, who are just kind of there, like you said, to tick the boxes or to get that sort of beer money at the end of the week. That's not what we want. We want the people who are interested and ultimately will make good tradespeople. So I think overall, there's so many different things, so many problems that we're facing, and, you know, again, generational views is one of them. We've had, you know, people for a long time have looked upon trades as sort of like, you know, if you're a bit stupid, then, you know, at least you could go into the building trade or something like that. And actually, there's lots of opportunities within the trade, and especially at the minute, unfortunately, you know, there is an aging of the people in the trade, and like we touched on there, according to Axo Noble, I think it's 66% of painters and decorators, which is my field, will retire in the next 10 years. The average age is 50. So on one hand, that's terrible, because it means we're not bringing in enough people. There's not enough of those success stories that are sticking with it. But on the flip side of that also means that the demand for the people that are there should be relatively high, and they should be able to fill these order books. So trades, I think now we are coming through the other side of it, and people are starting to look at trades as more of an appealing vocation, and not just kind of a fallback. There is, let's be honest, there's good money to be made, there's good opportunities to be had within the trade, and we need to demonstrate that to young people, and not this kind of lax attitude to getting people in and looking after them. It's all very well the government saying we're going to build 1.5 million houses in the next however many years, but the reality is, if we don't look after the people that we already have in the system, or we don't bring in enough new people, that simply is just not going to happen. So to summarize, would I encourage young people to come into the trade? Yeah, of course I would. I think there is, like I said, there's lots of opportunities, and I know plenty of business owners who are looking for apprentices. I think if it's done right, there's a lot to be said for these opportunities. I think there's a lot of issues that we need to iron out, and we do need more support in recruiting people. This is another thing that I believe could be an extension of the college side of stuff, in that, for many people, getting an apprenticeship is kind of just picking up a phone and ringing a few local firms and trying to say, oh, would you consider taking someone on, or would you, and really, if we've got 50 people joining the course in September, maybe there could be a system in place where employers were able to register their interest and say, look, we're at a stage now where we could probably do with a couple of extra pairs of hands. We'd like to take people on come September, because that everyone knows come September there's going to be an influx of people, and equally these young people who have just left school, let's face it, 16 years old, got no prior experience of getting jobs or how the real world works, so to speak. They could register with the same scheme. That perhaps it could be a bit done to marry the people up, or at least trial a few people with different firms or whatever. But that's just my personal opinion, and obviously that's not in any way endorsed by Trustmark. I'll say that now.
But that tees up the question very, very nicely for Colin at CITB. So Colin, the government is investing circa 600 million in training development and building capability within the construction sector. You're hearing directly from 3 people who are involved and have boots on the ground. And I suppose you've done similar exercises which allow you to understand how much money you should put on the table. But given the operational challenges, how do you see financial incentives and the sum of the work that you're doing to encourage more people to come into the industry to help address some of the questions and the issues that are raised by Daisy, Rupert, and James?
Yes. So yeah. First of all, everything that I totally agree with everybody's opinion on the difficulties that we have in the industry. They all resonate with me, being within CITB and also previously being in industry. I see them, understand them. What CITB, what we have done and what we are going to do in the future. So we have a dedicated new entrant support team. That's a team solely focused on predominantly dealing with small and micro employers, hopefully to raise awareness of apprentices and apprenticeships, which college courses they could potentially go on, offering advice and guidance and also mentoring training and support in that area in terms of how to develop and manage early careers, because that's also important too, and also the financial incentives too. So the last financial year, the CITB paid out, I think, just under £75 million in terms of apprenticeship grants. So just in the apprenticeship arena, we paid out just under £75 million. So I did just see I did also just see a comment from one of the attendees. Yes, plumbing and electrical isn't in scope for construction industry training board. Just to very quickly touch on that, it hasn't been since 2017 when actually those respective industries asked to come out of the CITB levy scope order, as they felt that they could govern their sectors more efficiently, I guess. So yeah, that's why they're not part of the levy scope order. Yeah, so we've got the new entrant support team. Another thing that we're also in collaboration with NHBC, which will hopefully address some of the challenges around the geographical location of college and courses, is that it has been announced in December that we're looking at 32 house building skills hubs that will be dotted around the country, close to big works that are taking place at the moment or in the pipeline to take place. These 32 hubs, I think it's an investment of around about 140 million. Some money coming from CITB, a lot coming from NHBC too, and that will be aimed around fast tracking apprenticeships. So you could get 18-month courses around your bricklaying, carpentry, all those kind of courses, groundworks that you need for these big projects, and when we should see that start to develop around 2026, 2027, hopefully. So hopefully by making more courses more locally available, that will hopefully eradicate some of the travel. I listened to Daisy's story the other day, actually, and I was quite flabbergasted with regards to how far she had to travel there and back, and absolutely that will put off a number of people. I mean, that would certainly put off myself. So hopefully that will help in terms of locations, in line with our financial incentives too. We do also have a travel to train grant incentive as well. So if the apprentice does have to travel quite a distance, we also do actually have a grant for the employer too. So yes, in terms of time and energy, it's a real pain, but financially, hopefully, we could at least take that element of the pain away.
Colin, how would people find out more about these various schemes, particularly the small and micro businesses don't necessarily have the same level of exposure to some of the work that you undertake? What's the best way for them to find out more?
First of all, I would definitely direct them first and foremost to our website, www.citb.co.uk. That has everything about the CITB on there. Part of the new entrant support team's remit is to reach out to these small and micro businesses. I speak to a lot of pre-registered companies actually who might actually have an apprentice at a college, but of maybe in the distance heard of the CITB, but have never registered, never tapped into our funding or anything else. So I spend quite a lot of time actually on the phone speaking to them. I go to industry events as well and speak to employers that have apprentices, but have just not got around to exploring the potential incentives that we have. So definitely our website first and foremost. Hopefully, as the new entrant support team gets more established and grows, we are actually recruiting at the moment as well to get even more people into our sector. Hopefully, we'll be able to reach out more and more to these micro and small businesses.
That's great to hear. I want to move on to a subject that I'd love to hear Daisy's view on. Daisy, you're in the plumbing apprenticeship scheme. You're working on gas. What's the view from your part of the world in the opportunities that are created with clean heat, low carbon technologies? Where is that an area that you are exposed to, and people who are in colleges similar to you are exposed to? Daisy? I suspect we may have lost Daisy there for a minute. I will shift gears and hopefully Daisy will come back in a minute or so. I'll pick up on some questions that are coming through, which we can use as a basis to have the next round of discussion. So one of the questions that has come through on the Q&A is around the problems with materials and for college learners. So do you, Rupert, have a view on what those shortages are and why that is a problem and what could be done differently? Rupert, you're on mute, and I'm going to ask that question to James as well. So James, could you come off your mute as well at the same time?
Yeah.
Shall I go first?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah. So personally, we don't have a problem. We're very well supported by some suppliers. We've got people like London Stone, Talisay Group. They're all hard landscaping materials, and we also have decking suppliers, timber suppliers. That very generously give the materials. In lieu of us supporting and promoting their materials. I know it's been a problem in the industry itself, especially since the pandemic. But I mean, I'm still running a few jobs, show gardens and so forth. I haven't experienced much of a problem within the landscape industry. I don't know whether it's, obviously it's very different in plumbing and heating, by the sounds of it from Daisy. But I also suspect there might be an issue with actually funding for those materials within other colleges. Are they holding back from their funds and trying to reduce, those materials come in so they don't have to spend as much? I think that might be an issue. But like I said, personally, we don't have a problem, and I think it's a shame if other colleges are restricting those materials directly to the student, because having a very hands-on approach to construction courses is the best way to learn, and you need those materials so you can progress in your studies.
Great. James, and then following that, Dave. I know Dave wants to come in. So, James, any thoughts building on what Rupert has just mentioned?
I think, to be honest, our experiences are probably very similar in that, we personally, in terms of sort of our work life, apart from a very short period within the dark ages of COVID, I think we've been pretty well kept up with the supply of materials and everything like that, the cost of which has obviously risen greatly, and obviously that's another discussion to be had. But I think in terms of our supply chains and stuff like that, I think we've been very fortunate in that we've been able to sustain what we've needed to. And I just wanted to touch on another thing as well in the sort of discussion that's going on. I saw a comment that said a big challenge for colleges and training providers is staffing and funding for resources. And obviously, in no way am I having a dig at the people that are running the colleges. We've had a great experience with many people who work within the colleges. However, I do think that they are overstretched, and that is a problem that affects everyone. And it's a problem that, like, again, if the government is serious about reaching the goals that they've set out, it's a problem that needs to be addressed. And if we've not got the funding for these courses, or we've not got the funding for actual teachers or assessors or facilities, then obviously it's not going to go much further, is it? So again, I'm not digging in any way at the people running the courses, but the powers that be need to do a better job in looking after everyone, I believe.
Thanks. Point noted, and we'll share some of these comments back with people in government who some of who are on the call and others who are interested in hearing feedback directly from you. Dave.
Great, thanks, Avinash. Just quickly, just to round that answer off for the participant who asked a question about materials, and just to give a voice to some of the other people who are on the screen here who may be attendees but didn't get invited onto the panel on this occasion. The other big theme that we picked up on the research, we talked about distance for some of these courses when it comes to the classroom element, public transport issues. They're not always in the right places, and we talked about materials. But it's also about the setup of some of these classrooms and these colleges. They're just not necessarily equipped to offer the full array of settings that the modern tradesperson will need going forward. You know, be it different sort of walls when it comes to kitchen fitting, as I heard from Mark. You know, different sort of studs, concrete, brick. You know, all the different applications that you will expected to be working with from day one. Once you qualify, the colleges just aren't set up for that. I think you and I, James, we talked about having rooms that are appropriate for spraying and different sorts of applications when it comes to you know, what the modern painter and decorator is expected to do. You know, our sector is diversifying so much before our eyes, but the colleges just aren't funded and supported to keep up with that, it seems. And all of our brilliant case studies kind of talked about that to a lesser or greater extent. So I just wanted to refer to that.
That's great, Dave. I think we've spent a good part of this discussion identifying some of the practical and operational issues that we all face in this industry, particularly when it comes to bringing on new people and training them. I guess I have two questions for Dave. And this builds on some of the stuff that we have seen from the research. One is apprentices are not only necessarily young people. There are people who retrain and come into the sector. So I'd welcome Dave's view from the research that we've done on how people are looking at bringing new folks into the industry where they probably may be more mature in age, but at least have a set of skills. And I think the second thing I'd love to hear from you, Dave, is what's the income generation opportunity if you do this well?
Yeah, no worries. So conveniently, I've got a bit of data on these things for you. Conscious of the time as well, so I'll continue to be brief. I think there's an element here about putting a good news story out more. So we're attracting more mature entrants into the sector who wouldn't necessarily and logically be signposted to it because they've long lost and left college. So Avinash, you're right to point out that those trade businesses who are managing to juggle all those plates, like I went through on the previous slide, as James alluded to as well, you know, the turnover and the earnings potential is definitely there. So the average from our turnover in terms of an average point of reference was £630,000 being an average turnover for an average RMI business in the UK. That is an average, so obviously hides a whole spectrum. There'll be sole traders who are turning over a lot less than that, and there'll be renewables and low carbon businesses at the other end who are turning over a lot more. In fact, 9% of businesses reported turning over in excess of 1 million. So the earnings potential is definitely there, and that can definitely be a good news story that can be put out into the wider public domain to hopefully stimulate a bit more interest from returnships or retraining potential, however you see it. I'm also acutely aware and have heard through this research about some of the great work that trades associations are doing. So BIKBBI, BIKB in the kitchens and bathrooms world, and SIFI, great supporters of looking at ex-military, for instance, and supporting them in the journey to retrain and look at their respective industries as viable solutions. We just need a lot more of that, don't we? and all of that has to be, the positives will always have to be accentuated. So I'll just refer back to my comment at the beginning of the session, which is that we're living in a competitive world. So we're not just competing amongst ourselves as trades, but we're competing with the sort of the wider ecosystem, if you like, in terms of the economy and all the labour shortages that are around there.
That's great. We're nearly coming up to the end of the hour. I took away, so thank you very much for all your inputs, for those who were on the panel and are on the panel, and for those who are taking part. I took away 4 key themes from here, from today, which builds on the great work that Dave and team and the guys at Oxford Economics had done in terms of speaking and with businesses and surfacing them. The issue around materials is a new one, which I know we touched on, but it had not really surfaced. And Daisy's experience particularly has been really useful to understand. The 4 themes that I've taken away from this is what do we do to make the drop-offs to endpoint assessment smaller than they currently are. There's something around James's great idea around facilitation, making colleges and businesses come closer together to engage. There's something around the materials bit that we'll feed back to our colleagues at CITB and government. I'm sure they know this, but sort of now you hear it directly from the businesses to see how that could actually link into what we what the opportunity is to help more people into the trades. And then finally, there is a good news story out there, both around funding, which Colin has articulated, and getting this out to the small and micro businesses, but also good news stories about the income opportunities. So not everybody goes off at the age of 18 or 19 to work for one of these logistics companies, because it's easier to make money versus, getting a trade for the long term. Not that logistic companies are necessarily bad employers. I'm just making the point around the trades offer an opportunity for people to work in and good long-term income. So thank you very much to all of you for participating. We're going to close the call now, and thanks for also the comments, which we will take on board and feed back to yourselves via either a blog post and support and offer that up to some of the trade associations that are participating in today's chat, and also with our colleagues in government. Thank you very much and good evening.